Ghislaine Maxwell's name alone carries shadows of power and secrecy, but when paired with the shocking identities of 5 global icons, the story takes a darker turn. The files she guarded did not just mention strangers in suits or faceless billionaires. They named an award-winning actor admired for his heroic roles, a rebellious pop star worshipped by millions, a politician-turned-celebrity who once claimed to fight corruption, and a cultural giant at the very peak of fame whose influence stretches across the world. Each revelation tore apart the carefully polished images these figures had built, exposing the hidden deals, private gatherings, and secret loyalties that shaped their rise. What began as whispers inside a prison cell quickly grew into a storm, powerful enough to shake Hollywood, politics, and global culture, leaving one haunting question. If these names could fall, how many more remain hidden in Maxwell's archive? The story of Ghislaine Maxwell's secret files began with a hushed rumor, one that circulated in low voices among prison guards and seeped into the curiosity of investigative journalists. When Maxwell was transferred to a federal prison, she appeared to most as a woman stripped of power, her influence broken, her future sealed behind concrete walls. But what no one could ignore was the possibility that she had kept something back. Prosecutors had long suspected she possessed more than the evidence presented in court, and whispers suggested she had built a private archive filled with the kind of details that could bring down untouchable figures. Within the prison walls, guards spoke of small packages moved discreetly before her conviction, and investigators pieced together clues that hinted at a hidden collection of files too dangerous to dismiss. This collection was said to contain flight logs, marked with initials, photographs of glittering parties in secluded estates, letters coded with symbols only Maxwell could interpret, and receipts that tied glamorous faces to places they would never admit to visiting. Unlike the heavily redacted records released during her trial, these files seemed to dive deeper into the core of an elite web, weaving together celebrities, politicians, and billionaires. To some, it looked like insurance, a way for Maxwell to ensure she was never fully abandoned. To others, it was blackmail material, carefully assembled in case the world turned against her. Yet with her arrest and sentencing, the question grew louder. Where were these secrets now, and who would dare reveal them? In the months following her conviction, rumors intensified. A journalist claimed to have spoken with a source who had seen the archive firsthand. According to this source, Maxwell had kept notebooks where she described private meetings, not in legalistic terms, but in cold, almost diary-like reflections. Each page allegedly connected familiar names with dark moments, capturing scenes that could stain reputations forever. For years, the public had speculated on the involvement of high-profile figures, but these documents promised more than speculation. They offered tangible proof of the unimaginable. The weight of such evidence did not go unnoticed by the people whose names were whispered to be inside. Lawyers for powerful clients began issuing quiet warnings to media outlets, making it clear that speculation carried consequences. At the same time, investigators debated whether Maxwell herself might try to trade her knowledge for improved conditions. She had lost everything, the wealth, the freedom, the influence, but the secrets she carried were still currency. With each passing week, the anticipation of a tell-all confession became harder to ignore. The most unsettling element was the uncertainty. No one knew how many names she had recorded, how much detail she had preserved, or whether her collection was complete. Some insiders believed the files had already been copied and passed to trusted contacts who could release them if she were silenced. Others suggested she had created multiple versions, hidden in vaults or encrypted drives across the world. Whatever the truth, the sense of something vast and dangerous hanging in the balance created an atmosphere of tension. By the time investigators confirmed the existence of fragments from Maxwell's notes, the narrative had already escaped their control. Journalists speculated about the first name to be exposed. Analysts debated the fallout, and ordinary people wondered how much of their cultural idols' images were carefully manufactured illusions. What began as gossip inside a prison had spiraled into a looming revelation with the power to reshape the reputations of global icons. It wasn't just a matter of what Maxwell knew. It was a matter of when those secrets would finally spill out. The first name revealed from Maxwell's secret files struck like a thunderbolt. It belonged to a world-famous actor who had spent decades cultivating an image of integrity, warmth, and family values. Audiences adored him for his roles in films where he played the savior, the hero, the one who always did the right thing. Charities boasted about his donations, and magazines celebrated his perfect life. Yet, hidden beneath that carefully constructed public identity, the notes described a double life that no one had suspected. The details were chilling, not only because of who he was, but because of how successfully he had shielded his secrets from the public eye for so long. Maxwell's documents outlined a trail of events stretching back more than a decade. There were flight manifests that listed his initials beside hers, evidence that he had boarded private jets destined for secluded island retreats. The parties were not glamorous Hollywood soirees, but exclusive gatherings where guests were stripped of their public personas and indulged in things they would never dare admit in daylight. The files mentioned code names used for celebrity attendees, and this actor's pseudonym appeared more than once. Notes hinted at a demand for total secrecy, reinforced by non-disclosure agreements and silent payments delivered through offshore accounts. What looked, at first glance, like simple charity donations were shown in Maxwell's archive to be disguises for financial transfers. Carefully hidden, deliberately untraceable. The actor's obsession with anonymity was striking. According to Maxwell's records, he often arrived in disguise, avoiding photographs at all costs. A hired driver would escort him to back entrances, ensuring his presence could never be captured by outsiders. Yet even with all these precautions, pieces of evidence remained. Among the photographs collected in the files were blurred images of a tall figure with the unmistakable build and mannerisms of the actor. In one shot, he stood near a pool surrounded by other elite guests, his face partially obscured by sunglasses, but his identity clear to those who knew him. Investigators were stunned by the contradiction between the man in the files and the man the world thought they knew. Fans worshipped him as a symbol of kindness, while Maxwell's notes painted him as someone who thrived in the shadows. The revelations didn't accuse him of direct crimes, but the connections were enough to raise disturbing questions. Why was he there? What role did he play in these secret gatherings? And how could someone so admired by the public have lived a life so carefully divided? The exposure of his name sent ripples across media outlets. Journalists who had once praised him now scrambled to uncover any hint of scandal in his past. Old interviews were re-examined, casual remarks picked apart for hidden meaning. Some of his closest friends and colleagues distanced themselves, refusing to comment. Lawyers for the actor issued immediate denials, calling the claims baseless and the files fabricated. But denials only fueled speculation, making the story grow larger with each passing day. What made the revelation even more powerful was the sense of betrayal it created among the public. This wasn't just any actor. This was someone who had been placed on a pedestal, a figure families invited into their homes through movie screens. If Maxwell's files were true, it meant the person they admired was nothing more than a facade. The scandal cut deeper because it revealed not just his private actions, but the lengths he had gone to hide them. It proved how fragile the boundary between truth and illusion could be in a world where celebrity images were manufactured with precision. As the first name to fall, the actor became a symbol of the storm to come. His exposure hinted that Maxwell's list wasn't a relic of the past, but an active warning of how much more remained hidden. If this man could live a double life for so long, who else on her list had built empires on secrets? And how many more carefully polished reputations were about to collapse under the weight of her revelations? The second name to emerge from Maxwell's files was one no one anticipated, a global pop star whose career defined an entire generation. Known for electrifying performances, rebellious lyrics, and a persona that symbolized freedom, this artist had long been regarded as untouchable. Fans adored not only the music but the image of independence, resilience, and authenticity. For many, this star was a voice of liberation, someone who seemed above the corruption of fame. Yet Maxwell's notes suggested a different reality, one in which the pop icon had made hidden deals that compromised the very ideals they projected to the world. The files revealed that early in their career, the singer had been invited to perform at private events attended by a select circle of elites. On the surface, these looked like extravagant shows staged for billionaires who craved exclusivity. But the deeper Maxwell went in her notes, the clearer it became that the performances were part of something larger. The star's willingness to entertain behind closed doors was exchanged for silence about damaging scandals that threatened to surface during those fragile early years of fame. According to the documents, photographs existed showing the artist mingling with figures already under federal scrutiny, smiling on luxury yachts and laughing in dimly lit villas. Each image stood in stark contrast to the star's public stance against corruption and exploitation. One entry in Maxwell's handwritten notebooks described an agreement that bordered on sinister. It suggested that the pop star had brokered unthinkable favors for high-ranking individuals in order to secure ongoing protection within the industry. Though the notes did not describe every detail, the implication was clear. The price of survival in the cutthroat world of music was compliance with a system that demanded loyalty and silence. Even the meteoric rise of the star's career seemed tied to these relationships, as industry gatekeepers opened doors that might otherwise have remained locked forever. For investigators, the evidence presented a dangerous contradiction. Here was an artist whose image was built on defiance and rebellion, someone who publicly condemned exploitation, yet privately maintained ties to the very forces they claimed to resist. The betrayal stung deeply for fans who had idolized the star as a beacon of authenticity. Maxwell's revelations painted the career not as a story of raw talent alone, but as one shaped by shadowy compromises and hidden debts. The public reaction was a storm of disbelief and anger. Social media split into camps. Some refused to believe the documents, dismissing them as fabrications designed to discredit an icon. Others began revisiting old rumors that had been ignored at the height of the star's success. Archived interviews were dissected, with every vague comment and every nervous glance reinterpreted under the new light of suspicion. Reporters began digging into financial records, searching for offshore accounts similar to those exposed in the first celebrity case. The deeper they looked, the harder it became to separate truth from manipulation. What made the story even more haunting was the suggestion that this was not an isolated event. Maxwell's notes implied that the singer was one of several artists caught in the same web of power and secrecy, each playing their part to keep the circle intact. The pop star's presence in the files was not only about personal choices, but about an entire industry built on favors, silence, and protection. To see one of the world's most celebrated performers tied to this network was a reminder that fame, no matter how bright, could be manipulated by forces much darker than anyone wanted to believe. As the second revelation, it amplified the sense of dread about what might come next. If even the most rebellious and independent voices could be tied to Maxwell's world, then the boundary between art and corruption was thinner than anyone imagined. And as whispers spread about the other names still hidden in her archive, the anticipation grew unbearable. The world was beginning to realize that no level of fame, no amount of talent, could guarantee freedom from the grip of secrets waiting to be exposed. The third name to surface from Maxwell's hidden archive carried a different kind of weight. Unlike the actor and the pop star, this figure had once held political office, shaping laws and commanding influence in government. After leaving the world of politics behind, he reinvented himself as a celebrity television personality, someone whose face became a fixture on talk shows, news panels, and reality programs. To the public, he was outspoken, charismatic, and fiercely critical of corruption. He built his reputation on being a truth-teller, the kind of figure who claimed to expose what others were too afraid to say. Yet Maxwell's notes cast a dark shadow over this carefully constructed identity, suggesting he was not a crusader against corruption, but a silent participant in maintaining it. The files described the politician's role not as a direct abuser or organizer, but as a fixer, someone who ensured laws, investigations, and media narratives bent in favor of the inner circle. He had been present at private retreats and elite gatherings, not as a passive guest, but as a man who could be relied upon to protect those around him. According to the documents, he facilitated introductions between powerful figures, arranged discreet meetings, and leaned on his political influence to shield the network from scrutiny. There were notes referencing conversations in back rooms, promises made to stall investigations, and a troubling connection between campaign donations and hush agreements. One particularly chilling entry in Maxwell's handwriting suggested that the politician was rewarded for his loyalty with opportunities that propelled his second career. Media executives connected to the same network allegedly paved the way for his television rise, turning him into a household name. To viewers, he seemed like a lone wolf, a voice of rebellion against establishment forces. In reality, the files implied that his prominence was part of a calculated trade. Protection for exposure, silence for fame. Every impassioned speech he gave on screen, every dramatic condemnation of corruption, looked different once seen through the lens of Maxwell's archive. The revelation shook the political and media worlds alike. Analysts who had once praised him for his boldness were forced to reconsider his legacy. Journalists who had worked with him began questioning whether they had been manipulated into spreading carefully crafted narratives. His opponents in politics used the revelations as fuel, demanding renewed investigations into cases from his time in office. Even his supporters, long devoted to his charisma, struggled to reconcile the man they admired with the man depicted in Maxwell's files. Public reaction was divided and intense. Some argued the notes were an attempt to smear a powerful critic of the establishment, evidence of a coordinated effort to silence him. Others believed the revelations were the final piece of a puzzle that explained his uncanny ability to escape controversy despite years in the spotlight. Old scandals, once dismissed as political theater, resurfaced with new relevance, and legal experts began re-examining decisions he had influenced. What made this revelation particularly dangerous was the way it blurred the lines between politics, media, and hidden power. If a man who built his brand on transparency and honesty could be so deeply entangled, then who else in positions of authority was similarly compromised? The story did not accuse him of direct crimes, but it highlighted his role as a protector of those who were guilty, a gatekeeper who ensured the network remained intact. As the third name revealed, it carried a warning louder than the first two. This was no longer about individuals hiding personal secrets, but about an entire system that thrived on silence, favors, and manipulation. Maxwell's files made it clear that the boundaries between politics and celebrity had blurred long ago, and the people entrusted to speak for the public were often speaking for far darker interests. With this revelation, the anticipation of the next name grew unbearable, because it suggested the final secrets would reach even further into the present day, shaking the very foundations of fame and power. The final name uncovered from Maxwell's archive was the most devastating of all. Unlike the actor, the pop star, or the politician, this individual was not a fading figure with a career behind them. This was a cultural giant at the very peak of fame, someone who shaped fashion, music, and social influence on a global scale. Their image was carefully curated to embody innovation, creativity, and progress, making them nearly untouchable in the eyes of the public. Every appearance was a headline, every move studied and imitated by millions. For years, they seemed invincible, standing above scandal while others faltered. But Maxwell's notes suggested that their meteoric rise had been anything but natural, and the revelations about their connections shocked even seasoned investigators. The documents painted a picture of a career engineered not just by talent, but by access to an inner circle that traded opportunities for loyalty. Emails stored within the files hinted at early invitations to exclusive gatherings, described not as glamorous parties but as rites of passage into a hidden world. The star's presence was recorded at secluded mansions and private estates, where connections were forged that would later secure them a seat at the top of the entertainment industry. In one chilling entry, Maxwell wrote that the celebrity had been welcomed and initiated at a gathering that blended business with secretive rituals, the kind of event where reputations were bound together by silence and complicity. What disturbed investigators most was the suggestion that this star's fame was accelerated by these connections. Industry gatekeepers, already linked to Maxwell's network, cleared obstacles that would normally take years to overcome. Music deals, fashion contracts, and media appearances seemed to appear effortlessly, as if the star was being carried forward by an invisible hand. On the surface, it looked like pure talent and hard work. Behind the scenes, according to Maxwell's archive, it was a calculated exchange, loyalty to the circle in return for unstoppable influence. Photographs included in the files showed the star in intimate proximity to figures long rumored to be part of Maxwell's world. One image depicted them laughing with a billionaire financier aboard a yacht. Another showed them at a masked gala where phones and cameras had supposedly been banned. These images, though not incriminating on their own, gained significance when placed alongside the notes and emails. They painted a timeline of association that could not be dismissed as coincidence. When the documents surfaced, the shockwave was immediate. Fans who had worshipped the star as an icon of freedom and originality struggled to reconcile the image they adored with the person described in Maxwell's notes. Critics accused the files of being fabrications designed to tear down the most powerful figure in culture, but others pointed to the pattern. 3 names had already been exposed, each with undeniable ties to the network. The possibility that this final revelation was true felt too dangerous to ignore. The fallout was unlike anything seen before. Brands rushed to distance themselves, contracts were quietly reevaluated, and media outlets debated how much of the star's story had been carefully constructed by forces beyond their control. The sense of betrayal was magnified by the timing. The world's most celebrated figure, still basking in the glow of success, was suddenly under a cloud of suspicion that threatened everything they had built. What made this revelation so haunting was the implication that the files released might represent only a fraction of what Maxwell knew. If this star, at the height of global influence, could be tied so deeply to the network, then how many others had also been shaped by the same hidden machinery? The final name was not just an exposure, it was a warning. It suggested that fame itself, as the public understood it, might be nothing more than a stage where the true power remained invisible, controlled by those who thrived in the shadows.